We are starting our fifth high-level plenary in this event, and we have splendid different types of high-level plenaries in which we have discussed different cross-cutting issues, including funding, and this is the second high-level plenary which is going to discuss about the strategies of the funders, and we have three distinguished panelists and one learned moderator. Let me invite Dr. Chandrabhushan, CEO of International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology, iForest, to the dais. Chandrabhushan is the president and CEO of iForest, an engineer and environmental planner by training. Bhushan integrates scientific and technical expertise with understanding of socio-economic realities to solve multidimensional environmental and developmental challenges. Over 2 decades, he remained at the forefront of several public policy campaigns. His scope of work encompasses both global and local issues, from climate change, energy transition, to rights of mining affected people and environmental governance. Welcome, Dr. Chandrabhushan. Let me invite Mr. Nico Janssen, Program Manager, Agriculture Livelihoods, IKEA Foundation, my dear friend. Nico, please come. Nico has a significant amount of experience in the field of agriculture, livelihoods, agriculture value chain development, and sustainable forest management. When I'm saying that significant amount of experience in the field, I've seen Nico really in the field. He likes to go to the field and he hates to come for the meetings, I think. With a background of tropical land use, Nico has worked in various roles, experiences spanning the IKEA Foundation, SNV and FAO promote smallholder empowerment, access to service and inclusive business practices. With a strong background in agriculture and forestry, Nico is dedicated to creating sustainable and impactful projects in various countries. And I think he has significant experience now in Africa and also in India, 2 significant landscapes or continents. Welcome, Nico. I would like to invite Dr. Srivalli Krishnan, Senior Program Officer, Agriculture Development Asia, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Srivalli Krishnan is the Senior Program Officer at BMGF and focuses on agriculture programs in India and Bangladesh. She is also the lead for all livestock, digital agriculture and food system program in India. Prior to joining in BMGF, she was in USAID in India office as a coordinator for agriculture and climate change programs in India, Africa and Asian region. She was also with Australian government's Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. Thanks for joining us, Srivalli. Let me invite Swati Agarwal, Program Officer from Oak Foundation. Swati Agarwal has extensive experience in the field of climate change, energy and sustainable development. Swati has worked in various organizations and such as Oak Foundation, Government Blockchain Association, and AI Policy Labs in the role of ranging from program officer to head programs and partnerships. With a background of economics and specialization in environment and resource economics, Swati has also worked on projects related to carbon markets, climate finance, and public policy. We are lucky to have you on board, Swati. So the stage is yours, Dr. Chandrabhushan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Good morning. Yeah, I'm sure that there needs to be morning session. We need to bring a lot of energy because post-lunch session becomes quite dull. First of all, let me thank the organizers, Ajay, and everyone for having me here. As I sit here, I'm an engineer and a planner and I work in environment field. But I was pulled into agricultural field by someone who is sitting in this room. I don't know whether she remembers or not. Is Kavita. And it all happened because India was planning to change its pesticide law. If you remember, the first version of pesticide law that came. I was at Center for Science and Environment, and before the founder of Center for Science and Environment passed away, Anil, somehow he made me the head of CSE Pollution Monitoring Lab. And I had no idea what pesticide is and how it is monitored. So I had to learn pesticide monitoring and understand how gas chromatography works and what is ECD, all those things. And we did some very high profile test and publicly release those results, whether it was on the most controversial Coca-Cola and Pepsi and pesticide episode, for which a joint parliamentary committee was set up, the fourth in the history of independent India, to investigate whether our test result was right or wrong. And Mr. Sharad Pawar was the chairperson. But that one study, and in the hindsight, I keep thinking about it, led to many things, some right, some wrong. It led to the setting up of food security, food safety and Authority of India, FSSAI. It led to a new Food Act, and it proposed a new way of registering pesticide and setting standards on pesticide. Somehow, many of the things that was recommended by Joint Parliamentary Committee, and I encourage all of you, it is possibly the best report to come out of Indian Parliament on agriculture, the system that we are talking right now, agriculture system, food safety, consumerism in agriculture. That report is still online, and I will encourage all of you to read that report. So that's my entry into agriculture. I do not know a lot about agriculture. My view on agriculture comes from resource and environmental perspective. Okay. From resource perspective, I want to, you have to think like this. 50% of India is agricultural land. But still, the per capita availability of agricultural land is 0.1 hectare. That's it. If the land, the arable land in India, agricultural land in India is to be divided with everyone on per capita, it is 0.1 hectare. Our total land availability is 0.2 hectare. Our per capita water availability, with the population reaching 1.4 billion, is now less than 1,000 meter cube per year, in fact, much less. And if you take Indo-Gangetic Plain, the most densely populated part of the world, one of the most densely populated part of the world, the per capita water availability is nearing what is available in sub-Saharan Africa, which is about 500 meter cube per year. Fresh water, I'm talking about fresh water availability. On top of it, our food demand is projected to increase. We need to produce more food. Government of India says that we need 500 million tons of food grain by 2050. I don't buy that, but let's say that this is what the government is looking at, 500 million tons of food grain. Increased meat, milk, fruit, vegetable. Everything is projected to increase. In some cases, it must, because our diet is not balanced. There are still poor people in this country that need to be fed. On top of all these challenges, resource constraint, need to increase food production, we now have climate change, okay, which is leading to extreme weather events, crop losses, and that is going to get worse. It's not going to improve because we are not reducing greenhouse gas emissions, even from agriculture sector, by the way, yeah, which is one of the, we do not talk about it, but agriculture sector itself is one of the high emitting sector as far as greenhouse gas emissions is concerned. And then we have 50% of population, maybe 40%, dependent on agriculture. But that is aging now. Our farmers are aging, and young people don't want to work in agriculture. Most of the survey in this country shows that given the option, the younger generation would like to move out of agriculture. So I want to just paint the canvas with a broad stroke on how agriculture, climate, resource, population is panning out in this country. And this is not unique to India. Okay. Nico and I were talking, it is similar in East Africa. It is similar in Bangladesh, where you work. This is something that is a global issue that needs to be addressed. Now, having said that, this discussion today, this session is supposed to be about funding and the views of funders. We will discuss that, of course. I'm going to ask them how much money you're going to put it on the table. Okay. But I am also going to discuss. Sorry? Yeah, he was checking in his pocket. Yeah. So, we need to discuss the purse, very important. But we are also going to discuss issues. I would like it to be a vibrant conversation. We are an open, transparent, democratic society. Let's be that in this room. If you have any concern of not speaking up, don't do that. But my hope is that we will have fair, transparent conversation, open conversation in this session. Okay. Let me start with the brass track and get over with it first. Okay. And the questions have come to all of you. Let me start with Swati. And Swati, give us, again, broad ideas on how Oak Foundation is looking at food system, how it is supporting some of the initiatives in food system, and if you can also tell us about your plans, if you can, in future, how the Oak Foundation is going to invest in these areas.
Sure. Thank you so much, CB. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it audible? Okay. So I think, and thank you for laying that overview out, first of all, that takes us back into the picture of where we are standing and talking today, right? And what is that context ahead of us? And I think how we landed to sort of the conversations around food systems was particularly, we have been working in India for the last, more than a decade and a half now. And a large part of our focus had been around energy transitions. And increasingly, we witnessed that when we were talking about energy transitions, most often, and I would say 80% of the times, you'd land into a conversation on food. Right? And I think that is where a few years back, we revisited all of our work, not just in India, but globally as well, just to rethink around, and it's just not probably about us, but in general, how are we also approaching our work within the climate ecosystem in silos, right? And I think which is where this thinking emerged to say that let's talk about what are some of the core broad systems which essentially interacts with each other, wherein we have energy, food, and natural resources. And let's try and identify, because, directly or indirectly, all of those systems does come within the area of influence. We may want it to be so, or we may not. And maybe beginning there, we started to establish, what are some of those spaces which maybe are either falling through the cracks because it's not just energy or just food, or maybe there are certain areas of work where, there is an opportunity for us to maybe scale the multi-core benefits through, the areas of work that we may pick. And I think which is where one of the core areas we started off in India, and it's a very relatively earlier journey for us, relatively recent journey for us. And I think one of the areas we landed at, and particularly from the fact that it fell through the cracks, was around food loss and waste. And why? It goes without saying the kind of significance it would have. For example, CB, if you're talking about the agricultural demand or the demand for food grains rising to 500 million tons, And if you're already talking about wasting 15 to 40% of that as a result of different processes and a different, of course, it's a very complex system, does it even make sense? And I think we started asking those questions to ourselves and really thinking through where are some of those leakages which would enable co-benefits into not just the way we are putting pressure on our land today, but the way we are putting pressure on water, our energy resources as well. On one side, we are talking about agriculture picking on 18% of the electricity demand, but on the other side, after spending all of that energy, we waste 40% of that food. So I think we really wanted to work at that nexus more and more and really identify what are the opportunities that lie ahead of us. And I mean, some of the recent studies, and this was something shared by one of our partners, which said that and this is just not India's number, but globally, even if 50% of food loss could be tackled, or food waste or food loss, I'm putting that together, although they have specific distinction, if that could be tackled, the amount of food that would be required between 2010 and 2050 could be reduced by 20%. So I think we are already seeing the kind of correlations that some of these systems have, and maybe starting off there as part of a pathway to start exploring space. The other area, again, which is very core to sort of the energy transitions work that we have been looking at within, and that cuts through the food ecosystem, is access to energy. And I think when we look at access to energy, it's just not in the context of providing energy for irrigation, for example, which is very clear, right? And the need is there, of course. But I think also looking at spaces where that energy could empower people to have more choices, and particularly the farming community. And this is, again, sort of a recent area for us, but we are exploring opportunities, for example, around agri-PV, et cetera, as to where those conversations are, what is the scope, what could be the inherent positive or negative consequences of that. So I think we are in that learning journey ourselves as well. But this is the way we have started thinking about maybe just identifying some of those areas of nexus between energy, food, and natural resources, and just thinking through what would make most for those, co-benefits.
Swati, these investments of oak is in India or in other parts of the country, other countries as well?
So what I just talked about is largely the way we are thinking about it in
Okay.
India as of now, but globally as well. So we do have our work around food systems, but again, I think it varies by geographies of the kind of needs there are. And again, I think putting that systems lens, we go with the fact that what are some of the root causes that really help us in delivering those. So for example, some of our work in Europe is also looking around healthy food choices, particularly thinking of plant-based choices, and the kind of impact that would have on the entire value chain of food systems. And what does it even mean? So it differs by different regions. Similarly, in Africa, I think most of our focus so far has been on regenerative agriculture. So it's really geographically contextual.
Okay. I just want to bring to the notice of this House that recently, Europeans have have put up a satellite to monitor carbon dioxide and methane plume. Okay. And 2 days back, the biggest methane plume came from, in the world, by the way, came from the biggest landfill in Karachi, Pakistan. Okay. It came in the news. You should read it. The average size of the plume was about 1.5 kilometers in circumference. Okay. Yes, it appeared in the Guardian. Okay. Now, methane, if you want to solve, why I'm saying this, Swati, is that carbon dioxide has 100 years of half-life. Okay. The action we take today will show impact 100 years later. Methane has a half-life of less than 20 years. And it has a global warming potential of 100 times more than carbon dioxide. So if you want to see immediate impact of reducing temperature or heat wave, methane has to be the gas, methane, nitrous oxide, black carbon, that needs to be tackled. Okay. But I do not see much conversation happening around methane. It's largely around carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. Very important. 80% of global warming is happening because of carbon dioxide. But in short term, it is methane which is going to make a difference, and absolutely right, looking at food system also from the methane angle is important. Okay. Dr. Krishnan, the same question to you. Tell us about your organization, investment views, programs on FOLU, and how you are looking at it, where you are making those investments, what are your plans?
Sure. Thanks so much, Chandrabhushan. So, just to give you a perspective, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is probably one of the largest philanthropies in the world now, with our annual payout of $9 billion. Sometimes it's more than certain GDPs of certain countries. We started off our work in India 2.5 decades back, and not many are aware that the work did not only start in health, it also started in agriculture. One of the earliest investments that the Gates Foundation did in India was on Strasa, or stress tolerant rice, which is called Swarna Sub 1, which can withstand submergence of over 15 days. And if you visit eastern part of India, more than 4 million hectares of land is currently covered by the single variety of Swarna Sub 1. So just to lay the context that the Gates Foundation has been working on climate, on different aspect of the food systems, without actually mentioning that that was the area that we are heavily investing. Just in terms of bringing the story down to present, the main focus of our work when we started off in India was to look at how can we improve the lives of small-scale producers, focusing on their incomes, on their productivity. But as we went up and when we started learning, we also realized that it is equally important to talk about affordability of nutritious diet, women's economic empowerment, and resilience to the impacts that we are seeing for ourselves. In 2022, the foundation pledged that we would put in $1 billion towards climate, but squarely focused on food systems. The idea of the investment was very clear that it would not only be upstream, which means research and development, but it would also be the delivery of those systems to the real client, which is small-scale producers. Since I can just give a snapshot of the work for a very recent time frame, between 2017 to 2023, just the 6 years time frame that I would talk about, some of the work that we have done on the delivery side has actually been able to reach over 9.5 million small-scale producers in India, spread across 5 states. While a lot of the work that the Gates Foundation does, which is visibly available in the open domain, seems to be more on the digital side, not many are aware of the work that we do on the delivery side, because we do not want to be front and center. We actually think that that is something that we are supporting the implementation capacity rather than implementing ourselves. Going forward, our intention is to actually focus on being a catalyst, to be playing the role of a niche catalyst to transformative change. The 2 main areas that we are interested in the food systems is, one, diversification beyond the staples, and second is market access. If we don't marry these two, we won't be able to achieve the inclusive agriculture transformation that is both resilient but also market friendly. In terms of diversification, while we are talking about diversification, it's not just going from traditional staples to high value crops. We also think that particularly for marginalized communities that we work with, the livestock also provides a very big source of resilience, particularly in terms of disasters. So it is absolutely important to also look at diversification to livestock systems, including aquaculture and fisheries, which is probably one of the most efficient climate-friendly practice, because for it has the lowest carbon footprint for the gram of protein that is being produced. In terms of investments that we are looking at more recently, you spoke about methane. We have been looking at how can we transform the rice paddy systems to lower methane emissions, both looking at direct seeded rice, direct seeded rice, but also moving into microbial consortiums that don't require any level of manipulation, that can actually help in improving not only the reduction of methane emission, but also nitrogen fixation, so that overall reduces the amount of nitrogenous fertilizer requirement for the rice paddy. So both the nitrous oxide and the methane problem can get solved similarly. That is something that we just kick-started the program in partnership with a Japanese university and Indian university and international organization. In terms of where do we see the future, we do want to layer the clear vision that food systems is an end-to-end approach. It cannot start from productivity-oriented programs, but it has to be the market that demands the productivity, but that productivity that is resilient. So the whole aspect of taking a holistic systems lens is a very clear aspect. Our work is squarely focused with the small scale producers in mind. So we won't be looking at large farmers and large tracts of land and areas under that to be focused. But at the same time, taking into consideration that you need some levers of change even within the small scale producers. So commercial small scale producers are probably the first to target because they are low hanging fruit, and then you can accelerate the change as you go forward.
Thank you very much. We do, I think one of the point that I'll pick is diversification, okay? When we talk about diversification, we generally talk about moving from one monoculture to another monoculture, right? This is what you are doing rice, and tomorrow you do maybe some other thing, higher value. I come from Eastern India. I do not remember eating the same rice for different dishes. Okay. And we make many, many dishes from rice, right? So a kheer will be made from a different rice. A rice and dal lunch will be from a different rice. Okay. Rice-based sweet will be from a different kind of rice. Okay. Now, and I have grown up in northern Bihar, very fish and rice eating community. I find it so difficult that today I cannot differentiate between one rice and another which I buy in the market. Okay. And the fact is this, and I generally say that your kitchen decides the biodiversity. What you promote in your kitchen, you will promote outside. Okay. And that is something that it is up to us as consumer what we eat. I cannot tell you, I don't know how many of you know water chestnut. We call it a singhara. Okay. I went some time back I saw singhara. I thought, I have not had it for such a long time. Let me buy it. And they were saying 400 rupees a kg. Okay. I couldn't, or makhana. Okay. Probably the most protein rich source for the poor. Okay. So I think one of I'm coming to diversification because we need to diversify our kitchen as well. Somehow our kitchen has been captured by someone else. Okay. Maybe probably 10 or 12 food commodities occupy our kitchen today. Potato, tomato, onion, chicken, egg, rice, and wheat, and plus puts few things more. That's what our kitchen looks like. It's up to us to decide what we are eating. So I think diversification has to be both at the bottom and at the top. Okay. Nico, you have looked at your purse. Okay, so yeah, so tell us what you are doing and what kind of investments you have in Folu, and how do you see this entire field today and in future?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having us here. Day 3 of this great gathering, I think, in which we have shared a lot of knowledge, information. It's a diverse set of knowledge, luckily. But I think also that's also why we love to be here, is to bring people together in a room, to think, to agree to disagree sometimes, but also to find agreement on the way forward. IKEA Foundation is a very young foundation. We exist 15 years this year. We've only been active in agriculture, seriously in agriculture, for the last 5 years. So we're a bit of a new kid on the block. Maybe sometimes we'll have to ruffle some feathers as well at the same time. But when we started our work in food and agriculture, I think we put people at the center of it in the first place. It's people who are the consumers. It's people who make the choice, as you say. It's people who grow our food. And that will always remain like that, hopefully. I'm not looking forward to the future where robots grow our food. Because food is life. Food is culture. Food is tradition. But food is also the future. And what we saw happening a lot, of course, I think, is that, and we spoke about it earlier this week, we're shooting over the planetary boundaries with the way we produce, consume, and dispose. It's a very linear system. Swati referred to it very well. The whole issue of that we are actually producing way too much because we waste so much. And wasting doesn't have a cost. It's so cheap to waste, in a way. If I look at my own country, the Netherlands, between the 1960s and now, which is only 60, 70 years, from between 20 and 25 of spendable income being spent on food, we're now around 8%, while income for the last 30 years have remained at par. So food has become only cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And in the end, it's the farmers who suffer from that. They're being forced into a system where they have to, in a very reductionist thinking, increase productivity, increase yield, and we've got this enormous obsession with yield. The only factor we have is ton per hectare, or milk per cow, or whatever. And all the externalities are being paid for by nobody, in the end. I think we spoke about it earlier this week as well. So that was one of our key high-level things that we wanted to look at. How do we bring the food system back into planetary boundaries? But also at the same time, how do we uplift for those living in difficult circumstances to be able to earn a decent living on it with a number of key returns, not just an economic return, but an environmental return on that as well, a social return on that. We've become all very individualistic in a way. How do we bring back community? How do we bring back grassroots decision-making and not having one blueprint as we had during the Green Revolution, which had its good things as well. And we can be critical of it, but had many, many good things. Starvation went down, public health went up, things like that. But I think a fourth one as well, and you spoke about it, that young people, women, they don't want to be in agriculture, in drudgery anymore. So how do we bring back hope? How do we bring back inspiration? How do we bring back spirit that people want to be the future farmer of the world? Because with the globe now being 50% urbanized, who is going to be that inspirational source that keeps producing for us? Because most of us, I think, are urban citizens. I wonder how many people are non-urban citizens in this room. I think if we ask them to raise a hand, we have less than 3 rows incomplete, possibly. But we all depend on others providing that healthy source of food for us. And we've lost track of that. I used to work in northern Vietnam with tribal communities there as well. And you spoke about rice, that what we rice there. We did a quick scan of rice varieties. They were managing 250 different varieties of rice. Indeed, every meal, every day of the year, every celebration, every whatever had its specific type of rice. The same, I think, Hadi and I, we traveled a year and a half ago, I think, in close to Hyderabad. Communities there as well, managing local seed banks of different varieties of rice. These systems still exist. And I think we need to bring them back. That's what we try to focus on as well, at the local level, but also at the global level. And not us alone as IKEA Foundation, but also in partnership with others. We are a proud member of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, which is about 25 philanthropies coming together to think about together, what do we need to do to move the food system into a direction where it serves its purpose to the people, but also where it takes its responsibility to stay within planetary boundaries. But also global platforms like, you mentioned methane. There's a few years ago, there was the Methane Pledge. There's a whole group of funders coming together in the Global Methane Hub, which is looking at not just methane from oil and gas, but it's also very much looking at methane from the food system. How do we reduce methane from waste emissions? How do we reduce methane from animal husbandry? Because it's not about whether we should all become vegetarians or not. But it's about how do we find new balance, and through collaborative action, through thinking together, find those solutions. Because nobody has the answer alone. That's in the first place. So I think that's where we want to try to look at how do we fund coalitions, how do we fund collaborations, how do we, together with the people on the ground, find out the new answers, their willingness, their opportunities to change what they have done before to something that they maybe want to do tomorrow. And learn, fall on your face once in a while, get up again, move on again. Because we learn most from failing, actually, as people. We don't talk about what we know. We talk about what we have learned and where we have failed. So how do we create safe spaces like this to talk about that? I think that's for us important. And that's how we want to see things moving forward.
Thank you. You talked about Global Methane Hub. In fact, iForest, my organization, and Global Methane Hub in Dubai COP, we had proposed a Global South, Global North knowledge exchange platform on food and methane under India's G20 presidency. And then we had a launch event, proposing that we would like to launch it at Dubai COP. We did that. We are still thinking how do we take it forward, because when we were working on this issue, and I was one of the co-chairs of Energy Transition Task Force of G20, under T20, Think 20, we very quickly realized that despite this knowledge world that we have, actually it is not a knowledge, it's an information world, right? Information world that we have. It is very difficult to actually share knowledge. You share information, okay? We don't share knowledge. And information is not knowledge that people don't understand. So we wanted to set up a knowledge platform, not an information platform. Anyway, before I come to the next round, I would like to open the floor, okay? I'll take 3 or 4 questions and then I'll go back to the next round. Please, short comments, introduce yourself. If you want to identify a speaker, please identify. I see a long hand saying, I want to speak. Please, come. Yeah.
I really appreciate that all of you have talked about landscape, about resilience. There's this understanding that, that we need to look beyond targeted interventions and targeted solutions, because what we consider a solution today will create new problems later. So the Green Revolution, maybe it solved some problems, I'm not sure about that, but it's created a host of other problems. So I just want to put this point that when we are talking about landscape, we have to go way beyond what you have talked about today. I think some of you are already considering that, but I think a lot more needs to be done on the implementation side. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman here, and I have a here, and then I'll come back to you. Okay.
Yeah, recently we had a.
Please introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Sarjit Dudeja. I did master from NDRA Karnal and doctorate on muscular dystrophy, neuromuscular disorder, and worked in JNU, AIMS, and other institutions. So recently we had a report of UN about hunger index, and India stands on 105. And here we are talking of choice of food, whether we take protein food or carbohydrate. So first we have to cater the whole of the generation who are missing this basic food, which is mainly carbohydrate. So we have to first think of how we can provide this basic food to all in majority so that nobody is deprived. Then we can choose whether we choose protein food or other food. So how we can resolve this problem? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ma'am? Yeah.
So my question is actually quite related to what this lady has said here.
Also introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Natasha. I work with rangelands and pastoralists. And I have actually a two-part sort of question. The first part obviously relates to methane because I work with livestock keepers, extensive livestock keepers. And if you begin to speak about methane in India, India having the largest herd, you'd immediately have to work through livestock. Unfortunately, we don't have the kind of assessment models that can effectively assess the ecosystem services that extensive livestock offers. And therefore, then if you adopt life cycle models, you're going to find yourself in very misleading sort of situations. So you have to be, and there is very clear reasons why India has not signed the methane pledge and things like that because of these kinds of issues. So, you know, the vegetarianism issue exists, and there is a very clear evidence why government does not invest in a certain section of the livestock value chain entirely. And so that needs to be thought through also by people working in food systems here, why we are not looking at meat markets, meat value chains at all, and why the government does not invest in it. But also, you know, philanthropically, if you're thinking about investing in methane, that's also a very tricky space because the lowest hanging fruit is livestock, and we have to be very careful there. The second aspect is actually marrying some of the conversations we were having yesterday and today. Yesterday we spoke a lot about, you know, farmers first and like bringing indigenous peoples, bringing vulnerable communities onto decision-making tables. And so it's very easy. We could convert all of India into organic mixed cropping systems and all of that, and that would say nothing about justice. That would say nothing about food sovereignty. And how much are you willing to actually invest in the processes that would actually enable people to come onto the table and make decisions and take leadership on food systems versus actually thinking about productivity, thinking about incomes, thinking about hectares converted, and those kinds of outcomes. How much are you willing to invest in the processes is what I'm wanting to understand.
I'm Drupad Chaudhary. Well, the background is I'm trained as an ecologist, but I have been in the development sector for over 3 decades, working in mountain areas with mostly marginalized communities. My question is to Srivali. You talked about looking into diversity and focusing on that, but you also talked about a single variety of rice that you have millions of hectares under. My question is very simple. How do you deal with this contradiction? Because on the one hand, you are talking about diversity, and we see in the indigenous food systems, when you're talking about diversity, you're talking about at least 50 to 70 different crops which are grown in a farmer's field. And these are marginal small farmers. And within that, each of the crops would have a varietal diversity. Now, when you bring in a crop, accession which is supposed to increase the yield, that diversity just goes. And this is what we have seen for the last 30 years, 40 years, right? So there's a contradiction there. How do you deal with that?
Okay, thank you. Kavita, last.
So my question is not about what are your focus areas, but about what does one do when a lot of wealth converts itself into philanthropy, and that wealth has come from a crazy capitalist world out there that somehow ended up in a handful of people and their hands. And the power of that money, billions of dollars in some of these philanthropies, getting to decide what happens to the future of millions of people, what sort of democratic processes are run by these philanthropies to actually make their decisions on collective wisdom for the facilitating the empowerment of the most marginalized. Do you go by your own wisdom, or are there other processes? That's my question.
I'll try to give it a shot, and thanks for these great questions. And maybe I cluster a few questions together in this. We as IKEA Foundation, and I think most of us philanthropies, we don't implement ourselves. All the work goes through, as much as possible, local partnerships that are part of society in the country itself, where we fund. And largely that's India and East Africa for us in the food system. I think we all heard Min speaking yesterday about CAT and Agroecology Fund, but also FOLU and other partners on the ground here who tell us actually what needs to happen. We try to avoid indeed, sitting, I think, as a god on a chair somewhere up there in the Netherlands where we are based, and pretend that we know everything. I think this a lot about is about co-creation and co-developing and trying as much as possible to listen to partners on the ground, what needs to happen. So that in the first place. And indeed, philanthropy, is it a makeable world? Yes, that's worth a good debate, and that debate is taking place. And we do operate in a space. It's not a vacuum, it's a space, defined also by legislation around us that tell us what we can do, what we can't do. And sometimes even we feel it's restrictive. So bear with us in that sense as well. On the topical issues about making choices also with regards to let's take methane as an example. Should we reduce methane from animals, or should we reduce methane from waste and low-hanging fruits? I think what we have to cut out is the excesses in the first place. If I look at Western European animal husbandry systems, where we push, I don't know, in the Netherlands I think we have 100 million chickens, while we have 17 million people. These animals never see daylight. Is that a system that we should want? I don't think so personally, but that's my personal belief. But if we decide that that's something we don't want, we can start working on it, and we can decide it as society, not as individuals. But also, if we look at globally the methane challenge, half of it roughly comes from waste, rotting waste lying somewhere. Half of it comes from the animal husbandry sector. The rotting waste sector is something that everybody, I think, can agree on, that we should do something about that. So 70% is organic waste that we can recycle. We're working with partners in East Africa especially. How do we recycle organic waste from landfills into organic fertilizers, into animal feeds, so that we don't have to use land to grow animal feeds, so we don't have to use water to grow animal feeds. So if we think much more in circular economy terms than in linear economy terms, we'll find solutions that at the same time can address the planetary overshoot while maintaining culturally important systems like pastoral systems, like animal husbandry systems. It's not about going to zero, but it's about, in some excess situations, bringing it back into responsible planetary boundary systems. And it's, in the end, it's countries, it's cultures, it's people who make the choice what they want. We can't dictate that choice. We can listen to the problems, we can listen to the opportunities, and make a choice. Yes, indeed, we make a choice to see what we want to fund. But that's always in conversation with the partners, because we don't have a patent on knowledge.
I just want to start with your question on the contradiction. That's exactly the tension, right? Where we talk about, my whole idea of bringing that 4 million hectares of one variety was that it was not required. We could have brought in more diversity in terms of different types of varieties that can still withstand that amount of water instead of going for monocropping. And that's exactly the point of diversification. It's not just going from one crop to another, but even within the crop, how can we really look at local land races? How can we look at improved varieties or improved technologies at the same time, not compromising on the inherent grain quality? Because often what's happening is the market is deciding what the farmer is growing. If you talk about monoculture around the western Gangetic plain on basmati, it's not decided by the fact that those ecologies are suited for that. It's actually the markets who are deciding that, you have a captive export market. So what are we doing? We are actually exporting water. We are not, and the reason for doing that is the crop is being grown at a place where the water table is dangerously low. In terms of Eastern India, there are several varieties, and if you look at the GI tags of some of those varieties, those are actually more competitive in terms of pricing and the quality, the nutritional quality, but nobody knows about it. So the whole idea is not go for, if you have one technology and yet then just push that technology across. It's the paradox. You have to look at how do we diversify both within the crops but also look at livestock. And I like the point the lady made there. We cannot move out of the livestock systems. They offer the biggest insurance package for smallholder farmers. Look at whether when a flood or rain comes, why they always strive to save their livestock is they can always sell them off and still survive. So we cannot think of a system where we say, okay, they are the biggest emitters of methane, so let's do away with it. No, that's also part of the diversified food systems that we cannot eliminate, but we have to think of more efficient ways. We have to think of more efficient nutrient management that can help in reducing methane. Do we need to look at better farm management practices at a smallholder level? I'm not talking about commercial farms that are looked at in the northern hemisphere. We are talking about farm management for a smallholder farmer who has half an acre land. What is it that they need to do to help even with one or two animals to be able to survive? Now, to your question, I just wanted to reiterate this whole idea that there are certain, we listen to our partners, but we also take a lot of learnings through the investments of others in the space. It's not just that, if the Gates Foundation is looking at doing something, it's not like a decision that is taken, but it's also coalition of partners, coalition of local knowledge. And more, we are moving away from implementers parachuting, but we are moving to implementers locally in country, so that when that program is actually nearing its completion, how do we look at sustainability? How do we look at making sure that it is not that the program ends and you walk away? It has to be a part and parcel of the system that is there, and making sure that the transition is something to the local and they're comfortable with that. So that's why a lot and more emphasis is given on co-creation, on listening from the partners. A lot of the time we do a lot of scoping and landscaping discussions, and this is where ideas emerge. It is not that we think we know this all, but ideas emerge and we try and see how we can learn from experiences, from evaluations, from different partners, different donors, to see where are the opportunities for us. We are not even a drop in the ocean to what it is required. And I think I think we'll have to acknowledge that philanthropies can only act as a catalyst. They can never be at scale as much as the country can do that. It can never replace what the local communities are putting in the system, what the local governments are putting in the system, or what the the private sector is putting into the system. We can never replace that. We can just act as levers of change, and for that we need everyone, for example people in this room, to provide us with that ideas. Look, these are the challenges, but what are the root causes of those challenges? And that's what we do. We don't just land up, okay, today I think this is a great idea, let's start doing that. That's never the purpose, and that's never the process. There are a lot of internal checks and balances, and a lot of regulatory processes that we are required to follow.
I think a lot has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat the co-creation part, and I think that goes across many foundations, and for us as well, wherein I think it's not us deciding what needs to be funded in different geographies, and maybe that is one of the reasons that our funding across different geographies vary as well, because it's really bottom up. It's coming from the partners like yourselves, and maybe through what we're hearing from the communities back through those partners as well. So I think it's really that it's more of that bottom up process through which we determine and identify what some of those priorities could be. And I think one of the other hats that we at times also put together is a foresight. And I think maybe why we landed on food loss and food waste was because it sort of showed us a pathway of a no regret solution, probably to an extent, and saying that there are so many more things that we can impact just by also addressing an area which does not only touch upon nutrition, but access to food. Just one of the gentlemen who talked about that it's not the choice always, but it's also even access to basic commodities, even if it is the same commodity. So I think that one program really helped us in thinking through, and this did not emerge over a day. It was really a bottom-up consultation with a lot of our partners. And I think one of the other things, just additional, that I like to add here, and I'm sure that's just not us and many other foundations also doing it in that way, is providing as much flexibility and core support to our partners as we can. And some of our partners are already here, and we know that we have changed our approach from year 1 to year 2, because we know that it's a very, very fluid system in which we are living today. It's so fast evolving, we cannot even foresee 3 years. What 3 years? We don't even know what's going to happen in the next 2 months. So I think how we also determine our programs is to provide as far flexibility as we can on whichever sector it is or whichever program it is, just to make sure that we are really listening into how priorities are also shifting on the ground at the same time, and not just fixating and saying, okay, we agreed on this and this is what we want to see towards the end of that project. And I think that's also prompting us to look at more and more core and flexible. We're already doing, I think, more than 55% of our funds as core and flexible grants, and I think the intention is to do more. And those are the kind of intentions which are set at the highest level, and not necessarily what programs need to be formulated on ground. I think it's really bottom up.
So the organizers are saying, I'm not going to take your questions. They have told me very clearly, let's finish this session, okay? And I think maybe this is the right time. The next session hopefully will be even more entertaining, okay? But let me end by saying few things which has come out of, I think the last answer was interesting. I had the opportunity to go to a place, to a garden called 13 Stone Garden. Okay. And the uniqueness was of that garden was that you could stand anywhere on that garden and could only see 12 stones. Okay. You could never see the 13th stone. There were 13 stones. The point I'm trying to say is this, that at any point in human history, we do not know everything. So while one can today talk about the ill effects of Green Revolution, and I had the privilege of working with Dr. Swaminathan. Even Dr. Swaminathan, by the time late 80s, he had started talking about the problems of Green Revolution. If you read his writing, or for example, the Farmer Commission he chaired later on, he had started talking about the ill effects of Green Revolution. The things that we are talking today, we still don't see the 13th stone. Okay. Maybe we'll see it after, when the new generation will come. We are going to make mistakes. Okay. If success has been the keystone of human civilization, so has been the failure, right? So I want to answer one thing about livestock. That, ma'am, you said that, the methodology. In fact, there is a seminal paper on methane emission from free-range cattle in India compared to industrial livestock farming in US. And essentially it shows that despite having we have about 300 million bovine in this country, right? And about 225 million sheep and goat. The methane emission from livestock in India is about a third of the US. Okay. So single farm owner, free range cattle seems to have, and the diet that Americans feed to their cattle, or the Dutch feed to their cattle, right? You get it from Amazon and feed them in Netherlands, and then sell them to Chinese, and then make money, right? So, no, that please don't do that, okay? That would be a little too much, okay? So, what I'm so happy that this panel took some tough question. Thank you very much. Okay, let's give them a big hand, okay? This is a conversation which will continue. I thank the organizers, I thank all of you, and let's keep talking. Thank you very much.